Hi guys and welcome back to Gdf Diaries Season 2. Today I am joined by Imran. You can do your own introduction because I feel like you just can, sorry.
Okay, my name's Imran. I'm a psychotherapist based in West Yorkshire, working with men from predominantly black and Asian backgrounds who have experienced trauma, especially in childhood. But I'm also working across different sectors related to domestic abuse, domestic violence, honour-based violence, forced marriage, as well as lecturing on trauma.
Thank you for that. Well, you do a lot, first of all.
Couple of things.
Sitting in 5 minutes, no, I'm joking. But yeah, no, thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you
just
for having me.
Thank you. For the people that don't know, me and Imran have been in a clubhouse before. This was during the pandemic, and that's how I actually kind of got to know him in a bit. And then I started following you and just started following everything that you do, and you're doing amazing work, honestly.
Thank you.
So yeah, you've told us a bit about obviously your job role and stuff like that, but would you be able to kind of let me know how you got into what you're doing now? Obviously you're doing quite a lot. But
Yeah, so about 25 years ago, there was a riot here in the city, and then a few years later there was a whole counter-terrorism agenda after 9/11, and I ended up working with some of the young men who'd been convicted or were involved on the periphery, and across the board there was issues of childhood abuse, but nobody was interested in it.
Okay.
And I would scream from the rooftops to mainstream agencies, statutory bodies, and they were all like, "Ooh, we don't want to touch it." And the police like, "Ooh, no, we don't want to come across as racist," which still makes me laugh to this day that the police didn't want to come across as racist.
Yeah, because
Yeah. All right. Okay, if you say so. I got an experimental grant from Comic Relief to work with just a handful of men on a trauma-based program.
Okay.
And we were meant to work with 15 men, and each year for 3 years, and actually we worked with 100 men, well 113.
Wow.
And now 10 years later we've worked with about 700 men, but we've had around 4,000 callers.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so our service has gone from just a local Bradford service to a national service. So we've got clients, because of COVID we switched to an online therapy model. Consequently, we were able to support a great number of men from across the UK.
And is your team big now? Because obviously you said you started.
I'm the therapist.
So you're talking to all?
No, we have a couple of sessional workers.
Okay.
And we have some volunteers.
How do you manage to do all of that?
But the majority of the therapy work, the truth is, the men who come to our service ideally want to feel that they want to feel understood. They've got idiosyncratic beliefs about why the abuse happened to them, and therefore, because of various institutional issues, they don't feel that they'll be understood in mainstream services. They feel they'll be ridiculed, and therefore they want somebody who looks like them in the service. They want to know that the service reflects their need, and therefore we've had to take on a lot more work than we've really been able to handle.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And do you work Monday to Friday, or do you sometimes also work in the week?
No, I try to. It's important to keep your own. Given what you're listening to, given what you're having to deal with, you don't want to become a secondary trauma victim. So it's really important that you balance it and that you get adequate clinical supervision.
It's interesting that you say that, because once again I was talking to Joseph about that as well, and I was saying that I don't know how long I'll be able to do the job that I do, because obviously I've just started my journey, I'll be very honest. Like, I've been in my job for, my for a role, to be fair, I started Refuge, so I'm just counting them out. I'd say going to 3 years now. But then I was talking to someone who has been doing it for like God knows how long, and she said that she realised that she needed to leave because of the fact that she wasn't really surprised or by certain things anymore. She was surprised of how they did it and stuff like that, but not like it wasn't touching her as much. And I wouldn't want to become that person. So my question really was going to be, because obviously you've been doing this for quite a while, how do you make sure that you don't get to that point that you're kind of desensitized completely
I think,
from what people are telling you, because you need to be able to connect.
Sure. Yeah, and you don't want to become either immune or so immersed that you end up, there's counter-transference. You're not projecting your own issues onto a client. So clinical supervision, I have arguably one of the best clinical supervisors, I believe, in the country, a man called Paul Buckley, but also, just trying to balance your own family life with it.
Yeah, 100%.
Taking that time out, and also recognizing your own limitations. If you're in this to rescue people, give up. You won't rescue anyone.
Yeah.
You can't rescue them. And I think from today's interviews, you'll see that someone has to immerse themselves in therapy, but it doesn't mean it'll fix things. It's a process, and it's a long process. And recognizing your own limitations.
What's the longest you've worked with a client for?
A year. That's the maximum we offer.
That's quite long, though.
Yeah. Well, through the NHS you get 6 sessions.
Yeah.
And personally, I find that immoral, because when someone's experienced trauma,
they're not going to open up. Well, I don't see myself opening up right away.
Well, I think it takes 6 to 7, maybe 6 to 12 sessions before the trust and the rapport, probably longer sometimes, is there adequately for someone to really start to experience any benefit.
Yeah.
Because first you're establishing safety. They're measuring you. Am I safe? Can I talk? Will I be understood? And then comes the next stage, which is now, exposure to the pink elephant, as we were talking about earlier, the trauma itself.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously, this sector you said that you work with, well, there was a whole long list. What would you say is, okay, I can't say your favourite thing, but what is like your go-to in terms of like the things that you, I don't know, I don't want to say what's your favourite thing to do, because
what's the thing I enjoy doing?
Yeah.
I do quite a lot of work at the moment on racial justice, helping organisations. I've just done a piece of work with Safe Lives on upskilling leadership in organisations, because if you have a look in the DA sector, white leadership, black frontline staff, huge disconnect, black staff not being recognised for their work, not being afforded managerial positions, not really being validated for their understanding, and therefore huge mistakes. So we're trying to upskill managers, but also create a leadership program for black and minority ethnic staff. I hate that term, excuse me. Black and Asian staff and other staff from racialised communities to upskill and to take those leadership positions.
No, 100%, I do agree. I mean, I feel like sometimes, because I think funny enough, I spoke to Suzanne about this, and I feel like sometimes when you are working in a role, it kind of brings it back to, I don't know, if you're gonna be heard. Do you get what I mean? Sometimes people can't be bothered to speak up because you already feel like, I'm not going to be heard. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like if the environment wherein you work or wherever you might be makes you feel like, you know what, if you speak and say something, you're going to be heard, more people would most likely speak up. So.
Absolutely. And well, you've got to be respected, and you have to feel, validated.
Yeah, 100%.
That, my contribution means something here.
100%.
And generally in the sector, what you find is black female staff are dismissed, and their contributions are very much dismissed. And that's really one of the things that we're trying to address here, to make sure that, one thing that we found was that victims of abuse and perpetrators of abuse just didn't feel understood. They felt there was a huge cultural disconnect with staff, or with the programs, and black staff were like, well, we think it should be done this way, but the white managers just don't want to listen. And so therefore it's an institutional issue, and it's one of the things that I think is really important we redress.
100%. And then bring it back to, obviously, you support predominantly like black Asian men, obviously some white men. So when you are working with them, how do you what's your process? How do you start off? Because I'm pretty sure, like we just said, it's not like they're just going to open up just like that.
No.
How is it that, do they get referred into your service?
Yeah, well,
Do
they
you
either
approach them?
self-refer. For the most part, they self-refer.
Okay.
Increasingly now, because we're becoming more national,
Yeah.
people know of us. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, we're going to go to them. I think it's a really basic thing, but treat people like human beings.
Yeah.
Many of the men that come to our service have been to other services, and they really felt like, gosh, you people have never met somebody Asian. You've never met somebody black before. And they felt ridiculed, they felt diminished, they felt demeaned, and, you know, like ridiculous questions about, they became defensive about their culture because they felt they had to defend it, rather than just being treated as a human being. And also I think the acknowledgement that you experience life differently because of the colour of your skin than most people. That literally walking into a shop is a different experience. You know security is watching you. You behave differently. Sometimes you modify your voice to make people feel safer. And that's tragic that we have to do that. But that's our lived reality. How do you explain that to somebody who's not had that experience? It's a very difficult thing. So acknowledging their experiences, acknowledging their humanity, but also acknowledging their capacity to take their life back.
And obviously, because as a woman, I did actually, I'm intrigued in how to, I'm struggling to say what I mean. Okay, cool. Backtrack. In terms of, like, obviously, the majority of the time, people that speak out very openly is women. That is what they're going through, ratata. So as a man, how do you make them feel safe enough to be able to open up about their trauma? Because sometimes I feel like, even for myself, interviewing men, I don't want them to feel like I'm judging them, or I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want them to feel like I'm not taking them in. Do you get what I mean? I can genuinely feel a difference when I'm speaking to men on the show than when I'm speaking to women. Because I feel like the women are kind of initially right away, they're more comfortable with me. And with men, it's kind of like, it's easing in. Do you get what I mean? And yeah, so how would you do that? Obviously...
What I'd say is we have to take it a bit of a step back first. There's a societal pressure on men not to get help.
Okay,
There's a masculine maxim which is strength in silence, especially amongst working class men. Yeah. And the best illustration of that is the fact that working class men don't get preventative health care. They go to the doctor when it's too late.
Right, okay.
Yeah, whereas a wealthy middle class man,
They go before.
they'll go just for an annual checkup. Yeah. Reality is we don't have the money to do that, because if I get sick, I need to work, I need to provide for my family. So that's just not my lived reality. So there's strength in silence. But there's other things. There's a masculine maxim, which is a bunch of maxims, which is things like be courageous, be dominant, be the provider, yeah, and don't be effeminate. And we've come to a position in society where we associate sharing our feelings and our thoughts with being feminine. So if you look at the kind of language we use for a man who we perceive as weak, it's all very sexist language. Everything is around female genitalia. Yeah, that's what we call men who are weak. So in terms of making them feel safe, first of all, if they've reached the point that they've reached out for help, they've gone past that point. They've realised, okay, I'm going to have to get some help. Then once they've come to your service, to have that emotional safety is one of the ways that we do it. Is we don't start with what happened, we don't start with the trauma, we start with where they're at. We talk about their current neurosis, you know, what's going on right now, what's the depression, what's the anxiety, and then eventually, you know, because we've got a year, it might take 16, 17, 20 weeks before they start to talk about the trauma. You know, some of the clients you met this morning, one of them, the first one, he's at that point and he's now talking about it. The other two, it's just too difficult to get there. It's too uncomfortable. So they project, they transfer, they talk about other issues, and that's fine. Stay with it. Stay with it because that's relevant to them. But once that trust is there, you have to confront the past. I've totally gone off topic. I think I forgot
No,
the question.
no. Yeah, the question is basically how creating a safe space for men, because obviously
Yeah.
with women, it's, for me,
Well,
I feel
let's
like
be
it's
frank.
easier.
Everywhere is a safe space for men, right? Men generally.
Okay,
Yeah,
we're
it's
talking
not a safe space for women generally.
But to speak, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I get what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But to speak about their feelings and their trauma.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
So two things we do. Number one, we took out the word counselling. We call it a program
Okay.
because men associate counselling with being feminine.
Right.
So we call it a program. A program tells men that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The other thing that we did is we took out language that men don't identify with. So, for example, sexual abuse. Men don't identify with that language because this is horrific, but they believe that's what happens to women.
That's really an interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
So
believe
an
that's
interesting
something that
take.
happens to women, and it's not something that happens to men,
So how do they
which
do
makes
that?
women's recovery. It inhibits women's recovery if we perceive that women are supposed to be victims. A man's not supposed to be a victim.
So how would they view it though? What do, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, they consider it an anomaly. I must be the only one that this happened to.
Okay.
So, as part of the process, they meet other men who did experience it, and that's the most powerful. I could, however decent or poor I am as a therapist is irrelevant. When they meet other men who look like them, that changes it. That idea of me too is incredibly powerful because they've spent their life
Thinking it was just
believing, well, this doesn't happen to men. Even when they see the Jimmy Savile cases, well, clearly it doesn't happen to black or Asian men. That's a white problem.
Right,
It happens in the white community. They're overly sexualized, blah, 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 blah. We're devout Christians, we're devout Muslims, it doesn't happen in our communities. Fact is, it does. And the abuser uses that belief to cast a veil over the abuse to make sure nobody finds out. And then they start using constructs like shame, honor, modesty, they're like patriarchal, dare I say it, constructs that actually use to silence the victim. Because the victim's like, well, who's going to believe me?
Yeah. Wow. I'm still blown away by by that. I really didn't think of anything like that. But wow. So moving forward, how would you say, or what would you advise what would you advise men that are going through have gone through anything, are going through anything, and in terms of speaking out or taking that step to speak out? Because we're talking about, okay, majority of the men, they go for help when, they've already passed that point. But in terms of preventing and stuff, how would they go about that? Because many people, I think, even in my life, I wouldn't even know because I don't speak out. Like, I've got brothers, and we've recently lost our dad, and all three of me and my sisters, we've kind of already spoken about, well, we definitely need therapy, this is that, and then my brother was kind of like, oh yeah, we should really do that. And it's kind of like it's not something they would want to do, but maybe it might be an idea. Yeah. And it's like, you can see from little things, like, obviously not a little thing, but little comments like that, it's like, so it wasn't on your mind? Like, do you get what I mean? And for us, it's kind of like, well, I'm definitely doing that because I need to speak about it. Like, I need to talk what's on my mind. And so even preventing the breaking point, because I don't know if I'm making sense right now.
You are. So you're saying that someone's experienced something, how do we tell them that they should get help?
To prevent them from breaking completely, like, that breaking, but the rock bottom, basically.
That's a really tricky question. I think, I could give some kind of hyperbolic answer that's a nonsense. But what I'd rather say is, suffering abuse, or not even suffering abuse, but struggling with something like bereavement, your brother will accept that you're going to get help, because that's what women do. Women can talk. Men don't do that. He's supposed to be strong, and he's not supposed to get help. He's supposed to just man up and get through it. And the reality is, the more we do that, the more it breaks us, because it stays latent. It stays dormant in us, and then we express the difficulty, the tension that's inside us through anger. Leads to relationship difficulties. It leads to tensions with people in our life because we've not dealt with what's really going on, and we end up stressed, thinking, well, why am I feeling this way? And the truth is, we've never let out what's really going on inside us. And I think so fundamentally,
That would be the
Don't
same.
suffer in silence.
Yeah.
There are services now for men who
Breaking
look
the
like you.
silence.
Well, yeah, but hopefully there's more and more services where you live. The people who
But
run
that's
them
another
look
thing, though.
like
Sorry
you.
to cut you off. There's not enough.
There isn't.
There
Okay.
isn't. I'll be
Yeah.
very honest. Even I'm based within Essex for work, and I struggle. Do you get what I mean? And when I have to refer someone,
Yeah, where'd you go?
hardly. Like,
Yeah.
oh, now I'm gonna send them to you, but
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
it's
I mean,
really
that's
bad.
tragic. That's tragic.
Even stuff like refuge. I'm thinking like there's like so many women refuges, but when it comes to men, it's a struggle. Do you get what I mean? And so many people do need to flee. Men need to flee, and they need to find a safe space, and it's so hard to find them somewhere. Oh, that's another conversation for another day. But do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
It's really difficult.
I do. I think as communities, so whether it's South Asian, whether it's Indian, whether it's Congolese, whatever, we've got to start considering doing things in-house. Like we've got an emergent middle class. We have a tax base. We have people who contribute a lot in terms of charity. Maybe it's time we start considering services built by us, for us, led by us, because we are the best experts on our own lives.
True.
Nobody else. And maybe we need to start taking control of things ourselves and establishing services for our people, because we're waiting for handouts from people who don't always really have concern for our well-being.
Yeah.
So most of the time we're a tick box to say they've done that. We're all BAME, right? Even though we all fit in one category, even though your culture is so vastly different to, say, somebody from Zimbabwe who's totally different to me, who's totally different to some of the other men that you met today. But we're all grouped together and we all have to go for the same funding. Maybe it's time that we all start taking ownership and saying, right, you know what, we need better services for our communities, but we're going to run them ourselves. We're going to get our people trained up.
Good idea.
We've got skills, we've got a whole generation of intelligentsia, we've got photographers, we've got people with a skill set, we've got IDVAs, we've got ISVAs, we've got people across the sector. Maybe we need to start
setting our own stuff up.
Maybe there's a point at which you start to recognise that we're asking for help sometimes from people who don't love us, who don't have our well-being at the top of the forefront of their agenda, and they have a duty to provide adequate services to everyone regardless of gender. And instead, what do you get for young black men? The focus is on knife crime, as if that's the only thing that young black men are going to experience. How many services are there for their mental health?
Hardly. Wow, you got me thinking, to be honest, because it's true. Because it's all well and good us asking or saying, oh, they're not doing this and that. What are we doing? Fair enough, we are trying, don't get me wrong, but like you're saying, maybe we can make an active change and actually provide those services to them ourselves.
We're racialised according to the dominant social conflict. So all funding for Muslim men is around grooming or terrorism. How many Muslim men are actually involved in those things? Like, how many people went to, there's like 1.5 million Muslims in this country. How many joined ISIS? 300. Of 1.5 million, 300. And yet all the funding for Muslim men is in prevent. Where's the funding for the rest of their needs? There isn't any. For young black men, predominantly working class, how many are actually involved in knife crime? Like, it's a serious issue.
No, it's true.
But they've racialised it. It's become a racialised issue. Well, where's the services for all their other needs?
You're right.
What about their educational needs? What about their housing needs? That don't exist, right? So the state has a responsibility for everything to cater to their wider needs, and they're not doing it. So maybe we need to take charge of things.
I totally agree with you.
Maybe we need a black-led ISVA service that recognises the cultural issues that a woman from Sudan brings with her, or a woman from Eritrea brings with her, or a woman from Bangladesh brings with her.
You're just giving me ideas now. I'm like,
that's what I'm hoping to do.
No, but seriously, no, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Probably going to finish after we stop filming anyway.
Here we go. It's my present time.
It is. Thank you so much for coming.
Bottle of Cristal. Oh, it's a mug. Get in there. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Cheeky him. Thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure you like, comment and subscribe below. See you next time. Bye.